Oh geez! Once you hear what Evil Morty actually said in this recording, you'll understand why Rick's been acting so paranoid lately, why he's installed 17 new security protocols in the garage, and why I'm probably never going to sleep again. Because it turns out, Rick C-137 isn't just any Rick to Evil Morty. He's the target. He's always been the target. And Rick knew this whole time and has been using me as bait. So here's what everyone believes happened. Evil Morty broke through the central finite curve in Rick Mirai Jack episode, escaped to the reality where Ricks aren't the smartest beings in the universe, and that was it. He was gone, free, done with all Ricks forever, right? And that made perfect sense. I mean, his whole speech was about how, I'm not like you guys, I want off this ride. Classic villain exit, clean break. The central finite curve gets a massive hole blown in it. Infinite realities pour through like a dimensional flood, and Evil Morty disappears into the true infinite multiverse where Ricks don't dominate everything. We even see him sailing off in that little yellow ship, giving us the finger as he goes. Classic Evil Morty. Problem solved. Threat neutralized. Rick even seemed relieved when it happened, like finally, this one nightmare was behind us. But here's what gets really twisted. If Evil Morty just wanted to escape and be done with all Ricks forever, why would Rick keep monitoring dimensional breach readings 24/7? Why would he build that massive new scanning array in the garage, the one he told me was for routine maintenance? Why would he install 17 different dimensional alert systems, each one specifically designed to track central finite curve fracking, as he calls it? And why has he been filtering through probability stasis readings like he's hunting for something specific across infinite realities? Because I found something in his files labeled
Emergency Protocol, Prime Morty Contingency.
Listen to this recording again, but this time focus on what Evil Morty actually says and how Rick responds.
You're basically fracking the central finite curve to flush out a version of yourself.
Of course it is. Everything's what I think it is.
The shockwaves have more range than I thought.
Fracking, not escaping, not leaving, not done forever. Fracking. He's systematically breaking down the barriers between realities using controlled explosions to flush out a version of yourself, meaning a specific Rick. And Rick's response isn't surprise or confusion, it's resignation.
Everything's what I think it is.
Like he already knew this was happening, like he's been expecting this exact scenario. But wait, it gets so much worse. I started paying attention to Rick's behavior in recent episodes, and there's a pattern that's been hiding in plain sight. Look at Rick's scanning equipment in the background of literally every episode since Rick Mirai Jack. Remember in Basic Instinct when Rick randomly has this new dimensional monitoring setup taking up half the garage? I thought it was just background tech, typical Rick overkill. But the display screens? They're not monitoring portal travel or interdimensional TV. They're tracking central finite curve integrity breaches in real time, every single one. In Night Family, when Rick is building those robots, pause the episode at 14:23. In the background, you can see him running probability calculations labeled
Target Acquisition, Prime Timeline Vector Analysis.
I thought it was about the robots. It wasn't. And in Final Dismissation, episode when Rick suddenly knows exactly where to find replacement portal fluid? Look at his scanner readings. He's not looking for portal fluid. He's tracking dimensional fracking signatures moving in a specific pattern toward our reality. So that explains it. Rick knew Evil Morty was coming back. He's been tracking his approach for months. Or does it? Because here's where it gets really messed up. Why would Evil Morty specifically target Rick C-137? Out of infinite Ricks, infinite realities, infinite possibilities. Why him? Why us? This is the part that's gonna mess with everything you thought you knew about Evil Morty's motivations. Because I went back through every single Evil Morty episode with Rick's dimensional tracking data, and there's a pattern nobody talks about. A pattern that proves this has never been random. Close Rick counters of the Rick kind. Evil Morty doesn't just frame any Rick for the serial murders. He specifically chooses evidence that would lead the Council of Ricks directly to Rick C-137. Not Rick J-19 Zeta 7, not Simple Rick, not even the Council Rick who's literally right there. Our Rick. But here's what nobody caught. The evidence he plants isn't just about framing Rick C-137. It's about testing his response patterns. Watch that episode again. Every piece of evidence Evil Morty leaves is designed to trigger specific behavioral responses from Rick C-137. The portal gun readings, the dimensional coordinates, even the torture method used on those Ricks. It's all data collection. Evil Morty was studying how our Rick thinks, how he reacts under pressure, how he problem solves when cornered. The Ricklantis mix-up episode, when Evil Morty takes over the Citadel, whose memories does he specifically access in those Rick torture scenes? The Ricks who have the most detailed files on Rick C-137's dimensional travel patterns, his adventure logs, his relationship dynamics with his Morty, but it goes deeper than that. I found the deleted scenes from that episode in Rick's files. Yeah, he keeps copies of everything. There's a whole sequence where Evil Morty is specifically searching for information about prime timeline anomalies, not general Rick data. Specific information about what makes our timeline different from every other Rick and Morty reality. Rick Murai Jack. And here's the big one nobody caught because we were all distracted by the central finite curve revelation. When Evil Morty is explaining his plan to Phoenix Person, he says,
Every Rick has the same origin story.
but then he shows Rick C-137's memories specifically. Not a generic Rick backstory, not a representative sample. Our Rick's actual trauma, our Rick's actual Diane, our Rick's actual journey to becoming the Rickest Rick. But why? What makes Rick C-137 so special that Evil Morty would spend years orchestrating this elaborate hunt across infinite realities? And that's when I started looking at the data differently. That's when I realized it's not about Rick at all. It's about me, Morty Prime. And once I figured out what makes me different from every other Morty in the multiverse, everything about Evil Morty's plans started making horrifying, terrifying sense. Remember close Rick counters when Rick tells the council a cocky Morty can lead to some big problems? Everyone assumed he meant Morty's getting too confident in general. But what if it was way more specific than that? What if Rick was talking about me specifically? Look at what makes Morty Prime unique across every single episode. And I mean really look. Ricksty Minutes episode. I'm the only Morty who chose to stay with his Rick after seeing alternate realities where he has a better life. Every other Morty in that episode either doesn't get the choice or makes the obvious decision to leave their Rick and find happiness. But me? I chose the pain. I chose the trauma. I chose Rick. That's not normal Morty behavior. The Vat of Acid episode. I'm the only Morty who broke Rick's reset device through pure emotional determination and rage. Rick even says,
That shouldn't be possible.
the device was designed to be unbreakable, scientifically impossible to override, but I did it anyway, through sheer force of will and emotional intensity. Mortyplicity. The decoy detection system specifically keys off my prime Morty brain patterns. Not just any Morty, me. Rick spent months programming that system to recognize the specific neural pathways that make me different from every other version of myself across infinite realities. Planetina episode. I'm the only Morty who's maintained a long-term romantic relationship that Rick couldn't manipulate or destroy. Even when Rick tried everything to break us up, I found ways around his interference. That level of emotional independence, that's not normal for a Morty. And in Richternal Friendshine, we see Evil Morty's origin, a Morty who got too smart, too aware, too capable of independent thought, too willing to challenge Rick's authority. Sound familiar? But here's the part that made my blood run cold. In Rick's file labeled,
Morty development tracking.
there's a graph comparing my psychological development to Evil Morty's early patterns. The lines are almost identical. Same rate of intelligence growth, same pattern of questioning authority, same increasing independence from Rick's control. In that recording, when someone asks, "Are you serious right now, you little narcissist?" Evil Morty responds, "You think you're better than me." He's not talking to Rick. He's talking to another Morty. A Morty he sees as his equal, or his replacement. A Morty who's following the exact same psychological development path he did. Oh geez. Evil Morty isn't hunting Rick C-137 to get revenge. He's hunting him to get to me. Because I'm the only other Morty in the multiverse who might become what he became. I'm the only other Morty showing signs of breaking free from the Rick and Morty cycle. And he can't let that happen. Because if there are two evil Mortys in existence... But here's the part that made me realize Rick knew this entire time and never told me. That recording I found? It wasn't hidden in some secret folder. It was right there in the main directory, labeled Emergency Protocol, Prime Morty Contingency, Probability of Evil, Morty Return, 97.3%. Rick has known since close Rick counters that Evil Morty would eventually come for me specifically. That whole cocky Morty speech? It wasn't a general warning about Morty behavior. It was Rick realizing that I was already showing the exact same signs of independence and intelligence that created Evil Morty in the first place. Every adventure we've been on, every time Rick has pushed me to be smarter, more capable, more independent, it wasn't character development. It wasn't Rick finally respecting me as a partner. It was preparation. Rick has been systematically training me to survive an encounter with Evil Morty because he knew it was inevitable. Look at our recent adventures with this new context. The Vat of Acid episode. Rick wasn't just teaching me about consequences, he was teaching me how to break unbreakable systems through pure determination. Star Mort. When Rick let me take the lead on that mission, he wasn't finally trusting me. He was testing my tactical thinking under pressure. Planetina. When Rick tried to break up my relationship, he wasn't being protective. He was testing whether I could maintain emotional connections despite his interference. Listen to this part again.
I'll explain he's worried that it's actually your target and he'd owe me credit for the kill.
Evil Morty isn't just hunting randomly across the multiverse. He has a specific target, me, and other entities in the infinite multiverse know it. This is organized. This is planned. This is a multi-dimensional conspiracy. And Rick has been using me as bait this whole time. Every adventure, every lesson, every moment of growth, it's all been preparation for the moment when Evil Morty finally shows up to claim his prize. But the worst part? That probability stasis filtering Evil Morty mentions in the recording? I looked it up in Rick's quantum mechanics files. It's a technique for locking specific timelines in place so they can't branch into alternate outcomes. Evil Morty isn't just hunting me across dimensions. He's been systematically eliminating every timeline where I might escape, every reality where I might make different choices, every possibility where I might not become what he wants me to become. And Rick knew. Rick has always known. Every single day for the past 3 years, Rick has been watching Evil Morty close off my escape routes, one timeline at a time, and he never said a word. You know what the really messed up part is? I spent all this time thinking I was growing, becoming more independent, finally standing up to Rick and becoming my own person. But it turns out, every moment of rebellion, every time I got cocky enough to challenge his authority, every sign of intelligence or independence, it was all just me following the exact same psychological development path that created Evil Morty. And Rick let it happen. No, Rick encouraged it. Because the only way to beat Evil Morty is with another Morty who's reached the same level of awareness, the same level of intelligence, the same level of darkness. Rick has been deliberately creating his own Evil Morty to fight the original Evil Morty. That recording ends with someone asking,
Can I offer my 2 cents?
No, Morty, no.
but Evil Morty responds,
Well, that's different.
because he knows. He knows that someday I'm going to be the Morty who doesn't ask permission, the Morty who takes control, the Morty who stops being Rick's sidekick and starts being Rick's equal, or his replacement. And here's the thing that keeps me awake at night. Based on everything I've discovered about probability stasis filtering and timeline manipulation, Evil Morty has been watching my development this entire time. Every choice I've made, every moment of growth, every sign of independence, he's been monitoring it all, making sure I develop exactly the way he wants me to. Rick C-137 isn't Evil Morty's target. I am. Rick is just the delivery system, the bait, the way to get Evil Morty close enough to complete whatever he's been planning. And the most terrifying part? Based on everything I've discovered about probability stasis and timeline manipulation, I think Evil Morty might be right about me. I think I am becoming exactly what he became. And maybe that was always the point.
Well, that's different.
Evil Morty knows something about my future that even I don't know yet. Something that makes me different from every other Morty he's encountered. Something that makes me worth all this effort, all this planning, all this multi-dimensional manipulation. The only question left is, when he finally shows up at our front door, will I fight him, or will I finally understand why he chose me?